Have you ever asked yourself what is needed to become a mainstream musician? I know I have, and I'm so glad to tell you my conclusions. Is it talent, hard work, a viral hit, a loyal fan base, a supporting team? Probably all of the above. Yet some artists check every box and still can't seem to enter the mainstream world of music, even though they're right there. Take Chloe Bailey and Latto for example. They are both incredibly talented, beautiful and dedicated to their craft. And yet something doesn't quite click. What's missing? I've now watched tons of videos going into detail about this, especially when Chloe's debut album dropped back in March 2023. And I'm quite surprised that one very obvious and crucial factor hasn't really been named yet. What some artists seem to be missing is a brand. When I say brand, that includes multiple things. Overall, it provides recognizability. It's the art of standing out. This can include a certain sound, look, writing style, or persona. Ideally, all of them. And with mainstream success, I mean having a big mainstream album or an era, so to speak, which can be defined by numbers and some sort of cultural relevance. In today's musical landscape, personal branding has seemingly become the secret key to mainstream entry. While it doesn't guarantee longevity because that requires evolution, it's often the make or break factor in whether an artist even gets through the door. This isn't by accident either. The turning point was the rise of social media and digital platforms, which happened around, say, 2010. It marked the beginning relevance of individuality. Now, this is not to say that artists that debuted before that don't have individuality or a brand, but it's gotten way more specific and niche now. This phenomenon isn't exclusive to music. In digitalization, the digital turn around 2013 was the groundbreaking change that defined a new era. New introductions like algorithms or digital autonomy have allowed the media we consume to become hyper-specific, as we can tell by our social media feeds that are personalized for us. Unlike prior decades where media was mass-produced, now it's mass-customized. This can also be seen in the economy or the healthcare industry. This turn has succeeded itself into other industries. Music genres, for example, were still heavily separated by the 90s, with Mariah Carey's decision to include a rap verse in her pop song Daydream, influencing future collaborations and merging of genres. And today in 2025, hyper-specific subgenres have developed. Fashion has also diversified. While other eras had a more specific look, our time today lives off of micro-trends, and people generally don't seem to follow one route. There are of course bigger trends as seen with looser clothes again, but it's gotten pretty diverse. Apps like Pinterest or Instagram respond to our activity and interest with a specific algorithm. Even gender expression has expanded, where some people reject the two-gender system and things like pronouns have gotten very diverse for people who choose to go by different ones. Every area of our lives has become dispersed. As a result, the music industry after 2010 has shown to be the same. Successful artists not only live off their music, but also their persona. As mentioned earlier, this wasn't always the case. In the early 2000s, for example, during the Britney craze, that type of branding, the blonde teen girl next door, proved itself successful, giving new artists like Jessica Simpson, Mandy Moore, and Christina Aguilera a model to work with in these early years. That was the formula at the time for young pop singers. Branding now looks different for everyone. There is no formula. What matters is having a brand, a specific one at that. Whether it's an aesthetic, a sonic identity, a distinct persona, or a shtick that sets you apart. This, however, differs between the genders. It seems like throughout the 2010s and 2020s up until now, male rappers, for example, can have a similar brand when debuting. rapping about similar topics, blending in aesthetically, and now the famous saying of all of them sounding the same. They can last for a few years, but even with them, standouts like Drake or Kendrick have been able to last longer, seemingly because of their specific branding. Male pop artists are rarer, which is why it's harder to come to an exact conclusion as to what is needed for them. And newcomers do get compared to veterans very quickly. As country has become more mainstream in the US in the last years, you could argue that they have the biggest songs while staying seemingly unrecognizable aesthetically or sonically. However, I'd argue that their success relies much more on radio play or industry manipulation. With female artists, on the other hand, it seems to be a concrete factor. The musical landscape is visibly overtaken by women, and therefore branding has become crucial for them, especially newcomers. And it has to be said, these artists also need a good team, label support, undeniable hits, and of course some luck. In the last few years there have been multiple success stories, and when I talk about a musician I mostly refer to the time they broke into the mainstream. These brands are ideas that people unconsciously have attributed to them, which has helped them stand out in this competitive field. For example, with Summer Walker's music, it was that late night feeling combined with an emo hood aesthetic. Doja Cat mixing hyperfemininity with weirdness and quirkiness. While sonically more diverse, her girly brand has stayed consistent. SZA as the soft and vulnerable songwriter. She loves nature, and even her writing shows a very natural flowing progression instead of AB rhymes. Olivia Rodrigo's angsty teenage persona that evokes memories of Avril Lavigne. Sabrina Carpenter's playful and sexy pin-up aesthetic. Chappell Roan's very colorful and theatrical approach to music. Each of them owns a space that no one else quite fills. Hell, you could reduce them to mere colors and music fans would recognize them. This may sound like we're putting them in a box, but that's not the case. All of these artists are diverse and three-dimensional, but at their very core they stay true to their brand. In fact, some diversity is needed because branding can quickly turn into repetition, leaving listeners bored. Case in point, Ice Spice. Importantly enough, brands aren't forced. They may be emphasized, but the audience buys into their persona. On the other hand, some artists are still struggling to define a brand. Like I mentioned earlier, two examples come to mind. Chloe Bailey and Latto. Chloe's shift to solo artistry has been discussed up and down the internet when her debut album was released. And it seems like people overall agree that something is missing. They mostly attribute it to things like too little promotion, people being too hard on her, the Beyonce comparisons, inexperience, or no core fanbase. And I definitely agree with a lot of them. Some even think that this first album was a fumble and have compared it to Rihanna's Star in 2005. But for one, Chloe has released a follow-up album, Trouble in Paradise, with similar problems. And secondly, Rihanna had undeniable hits, even way back in 2005. Chloe doesn't. And there is such a thing as undeniable hits. Songs like Say So by Doja Cat, Water by Tyla, or Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter have catapulted these women into superstardom. Everyone knew these songs were hits. While I agree with a lot of the takes about Chloe, what needs to be established is that the keyword is branding. Chloe does not have a brand. If you could describe her, including her music or her look, in 2 or 3 words, what would you say? Something that really describes her and her only. I could give you adjectives for all the women I mentioned before, but with Chloe, I wouldn't know. It's these simple things that seem to hinder her from cultivating an audience. Now, this wasn't the case for her artistry with Halle. They had a very strong vision as a duo, especially with their second album Ungodly Hour. The alternative and ethereal R&B, combined with the almost dark fairy tale aesthetic, was a match made in heaven. It was really then when they reached new heights. During a pandemic, that is. The main single, Do It, went viral online and their home performances reached millions of views on YouTube. They separated after Halle went on to film The Little Mermaid in the UK and Chloe started working on solo music. And while they didn't necessarily have a lot of control over these circumstances, many fans agreed that they broke up too soon and definitely had at least 2 more albums to give. To really go mainstream and then capitalize off of that separately, they were just building their core audience. Solo Chloe doesn't really stand out, not with her sound or her aesthetic. When the numbers came in for her debut album, selling roughly over 10,000 units in its first week, it was really frustrating seeing the two sides debate about the possible reasons for the underwhelming debut, with her fans blaming Beyoncé for not co-signing or promoting her enough, while the other group rightfully pointed out that Beyoncé's company Parkwood Entertainment did the heavy lifting by promoting her everywhere when the album came out. There were countless interviews and live performances alongside multiple movie roles, but both sides are missing the point. Chloe's team needed to guide her in terms of branding and work with her together to build an audience. Creatively, she was given full control on the album, and honestly it showed. The album lacked vision, a strong concept, and identity. And now, after 2 albums, she recently expressed how she wouldn't sell out for fame, and it was really frustrating to listen to, because that's not the problem with her career. Vulnerability and authenticity is literally what people nowadays want to listen to. I always felt like Chloe actually sold herself short. She completely transitioned from the elusive, more serious artist to a typical Insta baddie with generic R&B music. So it seems like she hasn't found out what's missing yet. And all this talk about selling out is the usual reason people give when they don't reach mainstream success. She has it all: talent, drive, beauty, and a force like Beyoncé behind her. She could do it. As far as female rappers, Latto would be another example. While she has some things going for her like her southern roots that she's proud of, she still lacks a clear brand or identity. She has no specific sound or look like an Ice Spice does, nor a personal style like Doechii. While she has dabbled in pop music before, it seems like she was hopping on trends created by Doja Cat. She tried to be the softer pop girl, while in the next song she raps in a more hardcore style alongside Glorilla. That just doesn't work when your brand isn't cohesive. And it's not the lack of talent or promotion. RCA has invested a lot into her career, but her team hasn't grasped what's missing yet. There are some cases of artists starting out with a brand but not keeping up. Megan Thee Stallion and Ice Spice are great examples of that. When Ice Spice debuted, she had everything going for her. A very recognizable look with the ginger afro, a girly style, and even her own sound. She just doesn't seem to be able to elaborate on that. Her fantastic branding granted her 2 years of mainstream attention, but she couldn't follow up. Her album didn't show different facets of her as an artist, which led people to be bored with her music, and she quickly fell off. And who knows, she may experience a comeback like Glorilla did last year. We never know. Megan Thee Stallion is also a really interesting case study. Her career has been all over the place since she debuted. While she initially seemed to be very careful with labeling projects, expressing that she takes albums way more seriously than her mixtapes, that mentality kind of got lost. Her mixtapes did a great job of cultivating a brand while also being different from each other. From Make It Hot to Tina Snow to Fever to Suga. She was the hot southern party girl, even coining the phrase hot girl summer. It was genius. And she of course had the shooting incident in 2020, right at her commercial peak, which I think was a crucial factor, since she was previously perceived as very carefree. She recently has tried to diversify her sound and with that her audience. This has led to comments like these, saying that she indeed has evolved, but people are biased against her. And to this I say, it's not about trying different genres. Megan's problem seems to be that she can't sell it. People don't believe her when she experiments, meaning they don't buy the authenticity. For example, she keeps trying to insert these generic pop hits into her albums that sonically have nothing to do with the rest of the album. They sound reminiscent of Katy Perry in 2010. She has tried dancehall with Inner Course, or K-pop with Strategy, or even the sparkly girly sound with Otaku Hot Girl. But you can't try everything all at once, especially if it isn't cohesive. One day she's the heart-spitting rapper, the other day she does Aegu alongside Twice. On one track she's sultry with Victoria Monet on Spin, and on the next song again the confident pimp in accent with Glorilla. And it seems like she's trying on their sounds as a costume instead of genuinely connecting to it. Take Doja as an example. She has experimented quite a lot, from hip-hop to disco to pop to Afrobeat. But she masterfully performed these songs because they were trenched in her aesthetic, whether feminine or weird. That's why it comes off as really authentic. Something like Attention, a more lyrical song, didn't really take off because if it's one thing that Doja Cat is not, it's serious or deep. With Megan it comes off as less cohesive and more as desperately trying to appeal to different audiences or looking for a hit. Instead of attempting to please any and everyone with one single album, she should just focus on truly crafting a sonically and lyrically cohesive body of work that can be diverse but really shows off her brand, like Fever did. The cover alone just tells you what kind of ride you're in for. She can and should reinvent herself. She doesn't really understand the concept of eras, it seems like. Fans want to follow an artist through different stages of their artistry and life, really. And she still chooses to present herself very incoherently, whether it be fashion or the music. Do you think Sabrina Carpenter just randomly wears all of these specific outfits? No, of course not. She's building a brand. Have we seen this woman in anything that is not overtly sexy or feminine in the last year? Her example may be on the nose, but that is some great branding. And it's not a costume. These things should of course come naturally. I don't think someone like SZA is pretending to be how we see her. She generally seems like the person she is presenting herself as. There is definitely a fine line between emphasizing the brand and just being yourself. The audience doesn't need details about the artist's private life or moments. They just need to have an idea of you and then connect to the music. We don't even know the guy SZA is singing about because the music itself sells it. A brand and a core audience can keep you relevant regardless of chart placements. A small but devoted audience is better than a big but semi-interested one. Artists like Victoria Monet, Charli XCX, and Lana Del Rey have stayed relevant through very committed branding paired with quality output. Even without massive chart hits, their focused identities have sustained fan engagement. Lana, for instance, hasn't had a chart-topping moment in forever, yet boasts tens of millions of monthly Spotify listeners. Her brand, with the melancholic glamour and poetic songwriting, is powerful enough to keep her in the conversation. Someone like Dua Lipa may be on the other end. While she has enjoyed some huge mainstream success, she as well hasn't really connected with a core audience. She definitely has a sound and a semi-strong brand as the sporty, glittering cool girl, but I don't see her fans eagerly awaiting an album from her, simply for the love of her music. It reminds me of Katy Perry in the last decade. So famous, so successful, but almost too mainstream with no identity. Her audience was the general public. Miley Cyrus as well has had too many different eras and comes off as more as a chameleon than a diverse artist, which is why she also hasn't had a really big cohesive era since Bangers or maybe Plastic Hearts. In today's music industry, personal branding really is essential, and once new artists realize that and put the work in, the mainstream world won't be too far off.